Hello, fellow splitting geniuses. Welcome to our Splitting Smart webinar, How a Private Investigator Can Help You with Your Divorce. So Split FYI brings candid and informative discussions with professionals who can help support you through your splitting journey. Our goal is to provide you with knowledge on various modalities and support that can help you to unhitch with fewer hitches. After all, knowledge is the antidote to fear. And today's guest brings us a wealth of knowledge in the world of investigation. In our conversation today, we will go over what a private investigator can do to help you in your divorce, their scope of work, and why would you consider hiring them, and if and when. So I'm Lila Aiken Ali, a divorcee, a divorce coach, and the founder of Split FYI.
Hi, I'm Heather Steer, a divorcee, a CDFA, divorce coach, and the co-founder of Split FYI. And before we introduce our next guest, I just want to highlight a couple of things in the webinar protocols. So if you have any questions for our guest, in the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. So click on that. I think some people will have chat enabled or chat not. So I just go straight to the Q&A box, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the discussion, and we'll figure out, we definitely will have a few minutes at the end to answer questions. And if appropriate, I'll jump in and we'll use that in our conversation today as well. So without further ado, today's guest is Samantha Santiago, and I'm so excited to have her here today. She is a licensed private investigator in Texas and the CEO of Premier Pathfinders, a private investigations and security consultancy firm with a focus on criminal investigations, corporate due diligence, and civil litigation support. She's worked on an array of cases, including human trafficking, missing persons, fraud, and C-suite executive vetting. And previously, she spent 13 years in the CIA, where she spearheaded numerous operations on a presidentially directed effort against top terrorist threats to the US. Whew, Samantha, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me, Layla and Heather. I appreciate you having me today. And I look forward to our discussion, and I hope I can be a resource for your clients.
Yeah, completely. Well, I think one of the burning questions always is, well, there's debunking a theory around private investigation, because we grew up with, a lot of these private investigation television shows that are like, oh, the big guy, the camera in scoping out, certain things. And I know where there's an aspect of that. There's a lot of things a private investigator can do and can uncover. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we've gone over the bio, but anything that you want to, or we didn't cover, you want to share. And also, what is the scope of work of a private investigator? So.
Okay. I don't have much more to add to my bio. I worked in the federal government for 13 years. I left in 2019, started my own company in investigations. I do mostly criminal investigations, civil litigation support. Also have a side business doing corporate due diligence for investors. Mm-hmm. And as far as what a PI does, just like any profession, there are a ton of different specialties that people can focus on. I focus on criminal investigations and civil litigation support, so I typically work with a lot of law firms, but you can have those investigators that work in the insurance industry. They can work for insurance companies. Say a person injures, they fall, they injure themselves, and they claim that they can't walk. Mm-hmm. And the PI will go and, have footage of them running in the gym. Or you can have people that specialize in digital forensics. So there'll be, crimes committed and the prosecution wants to see what's on the suspect's phone. There's a chain of custody, the phone's brought to a digital forensics company, and they will go through the contents of the phone, look for relevant pieces of information that's pertinent to the case. Mm-hmm. What else? There's missing persons cases, cold cases. A lot of that is pro bono work, or they're being hired by privately by the family. There is, corporate investigators. They work with businesses, for example, employee theft. There is cybersecurity. So I have a friend that has a cryptocurrency investigations company So he deals solely with companies and individuals that are being scammed online through cryptocurrency. So it's a highly specialized field. What else? I think those are the main ones, but there's just a ton of different things. I think when people think of private investigator, they think of what they see in the media, and it's someone hiding behind the bushes and taking pictures of the cheating spouse. And that is just a tiny, tiny portion of what a private investigator does. There's so many other things, specialty fields that they can be, that they can focus on.
Right. And there's a forensic part of it as well, right? So there's a lot of people who would wonder, okay, do I need a forensic accountant, or do I need somebody to figure out if they're hiding assets or the bank accounts and so forth, especially that comes up a lot in the divorce world. So does that scope of work fall under a private investigator too?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I've done cases like that before, where a typical situation in a divorce case is the spouse suspects, or the person suspects their spouse is hiding assets. And the investigator will look into all aspects of this. Depending on how complex it is, they might want to hire a financial investigator. But I've done cases in the past to where the husband is taking joint money that they earned and hiding it through other means. So it's a typical situation where someone might want to hire a private investigator to look into that.
Right.
And you have the tools to go search the web to find potentially where that money flow goes.
Yeah, so as a private investigator, I don't have access to people's bank information. There are certain things that I think everyone needs to be aware of what we can do, what we can't do. So for example, bank information, medical records, cell phone data, we don't have access to that. That would be illegal, right, for a private citizen to have access to that. Law enforcement are the ones that are going to have access to that through subpoenas. So it's really important when you talk to a private investigator, if they say, oh, well, I can find out if your husband was at this location or was cheating, or, I can look at their cell phone records, or I can look at their bank accounts to see what they're spending their money on. That is highly, highly illegal.
Not someone you want to work with.
Yes, exactly. Not someone you want to give your money to that's, going through taking these illegal measures.
And it wouldn't be admissible. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah, definitely. But what we do have access to, what the general public wouldn't have access to, and that's what we have a license for, would be things like criminal history, bankruptcy records, property records, driving records, professional licenses, judgments, liens, assets, marriage, death, divorce records. A lot of it is public information. A lot of it is sensitive public information. So this information we get through specialized databases, and you need to have a private investigator license to get access to these databases, because it holds a lot of sensitive data, privately, what's it called, PII data. So personally identifiable information on people. And you have to be very careful on how you handle that information.
And
that would be great.
Sorry, go on.
But that would be great for things like finding out corporate records, or are they involved in different companies? That comes up in a lot of cases that I have, that we're just trying to determine who owns the business, who really is involved in the business.
Yeah.
So, and those records are hard to get, and every state has a different registration process.
Every state has a different way of going about getting those public records. Some states are much easier than others. Some states don't even have those records online.
Interesting.
I'm fortunate, I live in Texas, so a lot of this information is online and readily available. But other states like West Virginia, a lot of their court documents aren't uploaded yet online.
So that brings us to cross-border. Because you hold a license in Texas, could you work in other states, or do you have affiliates? How does that work if someone were to seek your services?
Yeah, so even though I'm licensed in Texas, it doesn't mean that I'm restricted to only cases in Texas. I can work outside of Texas, anywhere in the US. When I do research on people, it's not like I'm limited to people in Texas. I can research anyone in the US because of the databases that I have. But for example, if I want to, run surveillance on someone that lives in Arizona, I'm not licensed in Arizona. So what I'll do is I will subcontract that portion of the job to a colleague that I know in Arizona, and he or she will do that work.
Okay.
But in terms of just doing research on, this person opened up a company in Colorado, then they opened up a company in Delaware, and then, any kind of cross-border research like that, I can definitely do.
Okay. Amazing. It's when, I know we went over this a little bit, but what would you think, like when someone is going through a divorce or separation, and in your experience, when would you think they would need to use a PI? Like that's one of those questions, because everyone's like, I need to get the data and I need to get the information, but really, what is it? What would it take for somebody to actually use a PI in this case?
So I would say that they could hire a PI at any stage of their divorce. It's really dependent on the situation. And what I would encourage folks to do is, if they're interested, just to talk to a private investigator and tell them, this is my situation. What is your professional opinion on what I should do or how I should handle things? Yeah.
Well, if they feel that they're not getting the full picture, if they feel there's something that is being hidden by their soon to be ex-spouse, and these are the feelings that there must have to be triggered to, right? And that actually finding out this data is pertinent to their case as well, right? There's a lot of things that, we'd like to know just to make us reassured that, okay, yeah, they're cheating on us, but that's not, is it because you need it for your case, or is it because you just want to know for yourself, right? Or a lot of that emotion, which I would always say that if it's an emotional trigger that you're trying to, that could just exasperate the case in itself.
So what I like to do, what I think is important, is to talk with the client and get a deeper understanding of their situation, because everyone's story is different, and there's not a one-stop shop solution to each person's problem. So it's really important to, like any private investigator, you have to ask questions. You need to, pull out those threads of information and figure out what's important, what's relevant, and sort of what is the most efficient way to approach their problem.
Right.
I've heard of, folks that will call up a private investigator and say, oh, I think my spouse is cheating on me and I want to hire a private investigator. And the person will say, okay, well, I will do a week of surveillance on your spouse and it's going to cost you X amount of money. That to me is a red flag. Do not hire that person because that means that they are caring more about the money than they are about the client. Because what you really should be asking is, okay, why do you think your husband or wife is cheating on you? Why do you think so? And if you get that information, say they are cheating on you, then what is your intention? What do you intend on doing with that information? Texas is a no-fault state, so you don't need to prove that your spouse has cheated on you to get a divorce.
Right.
So a lot of times, and sometimes people may not know what they need, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So a lot of times it's just kind of understanding their situation and then figuring out the best way to approach the problem.
Right. And there's a lot of heated emotion in all of this. So to decipher as a private investigator, to kind of hold their hand a little bit more, to say, is this really the right move at this time as well? Like, is this what it's going to take for you to actually leave your spouse? Right? Is that the case? Is this something that you need to solidify? But you're already thinking that it's happening, is something to always consider. That is this worth of spending the money to try to solidify the fact of some gut feeling that you're having? I mean, there's a lot of emotion, and to have someone that's cognizant of that on the receiving end, rather than just, I want to take your money and prove your gut feeling right. So, is huge. And I think that's such an important, because you're not thinking straight when you're in that sense, in that state of mind,
Yeah, for sure.
And you're right. And there's not too many at fault states anyway left. So if it's something that you need for that, then it makes a lot of sense. But
Mhm.
Yeah,
Usually it's
there's
not.
a return on investment for it. Because,
Yeah.
when you start pulling at some threads, it also can be more time needed, more facts need to be gathered. And
Mhm.
so it's looking at that. So some other examples would be the hidden assets, right? That's probably a pretty common one that attorneys, I would imagine, hire you for.
Yeah, that's a very common situation where a person suspects their spouse of hiding assets, or maybe they suspect their spouse of violating the custody agreement. And their spouse has the kids for the weekend, and they suspect that they go off to the bars and party and leave their kids at home.
that's interesting.
Or they go off to the beach for the day and leave the kids at home. So, and there's things that we can do as private investigators. We can do surveillance, we can do social media searches. So that's another type of situation. And another thing I wanted to mention is if the person is going through a divorce and they have an upcoming trial, law firms can hire private investigators to do deep dive assessments on expert witnesses testifying against the client. So I've done this in the past where, and usually you don't find anything derogatory, but I've done this in the past where I looked at 5 individuals and 2 of them, 2 expert witnesses, had a lot of derogatory information, so much so that it discredited anything that they would say. So things like that. Again, that's the later stage of the divorce.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting on a strategy for a trial.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense though. Like, trying to take those witnesses off the stand. A couple of points you made about red flags for when you're interviewing. First of all, like people are like, I haven't even ever hired an attorney. Like that's already intimidating enough. And now you're looking at these other, special class of support people. And how do you even what do you even look for in a private investigator? Obviously, to your point, that was great advice. Don't just look at, hey, I'll do it for a week. Here's some money. And here's how much it's going to cost you. But what about credentials, backgrounds? What types of things would I don't even know what questions I would ask.
Yeah, so the very first thing that I would do if I was hiring a private investigator would be to check to make sure they're licensed, because there are a lot of unlicensed investigators out there. But I will caveat and say that most states require a license except for 6 states. And those are Colorado, Alaska, South Dakota, Wyoming, Mississippi. Is that 6?
No.
That was
yeah, that's 6, I think.
Close.
So most states require you to be licensed. So the first thing I would do would be to check to make sure you're licensed, and that is public information. So usually private investigators are governed by some sort of state security department.
Yeah.
Like in Texas, where private investigators are under the Department of Public Safety Private Security Bureau. So you can go to their website, you can click on the link, you can type in the person's first name's last name, you can type in the company name, and there should be a license for the person and the company. If you don't see that, then to me, that's a red flag. You don't want to hire someone who's unlicensed, because that means that they are probably going to be doing shady and illegal things that you don't want to get mixed up in.
Yep.
So yeah, the first thing I would do would be to check their license if they're in a state that requires a license. If they're in a state that doesn't require a license, I would see if they are licensed in other states, because a lot of times people in those states that don't require a license, they'll get licensed in other states so that it helps prove their bona fides. Right. So again, check the license. And then I would say, make sure that when you call up the person that it's a free consultation. So I've seen situations where people say, oh, in order to talk with me, you have to pay this amount of money. No, a first consultation should always be free, because you don't know if you're going to take the client on you're going to take the person on as a client. You don't know what their situation is. Someone who just says, oh, give me this amount of money, I'll talk to you. It's generally a red flag. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just someone who is asking you a lot of questions to figure out your background, your story, who seems to care about solving whatever issue that you're having. Empathy is a big one, I think. And someone who is professional, discreet, who's going to be sensitive to your case. And what else? Yeah, and again, someone who's not going to do anything illegal, because there are people out there who are, you know, doing shady things, and you don't want to get mixed up with that.
No, and it's also goes against you. It's not going to work for you at the end of the day. I mean, the
Exactly.
outcome that most people want is, you know, something that's more positive, especially when you have a family and you're going through a divorce, and
Yeah.
you know, it's just information gathering. This isn't something to, you know, is the stuff that you cannot find as a person or have the bandwidth to, and you're emotional. I mean, even you were mentioning before about, you know, the social media. I'm like, oh, you know, you're in a state, a lot of people could go through social media and find out what their ex is probably doing, but do they really want to? You know, actually looking at that and finding that is an emotional trigger, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's so much better that like somebody else is doing that, collating the data and just summarizing it rather than you viewing it and seeing it and all of its dirtiness, you know? So yeah, very important. So you've gone over a lot of ways of how a private investigator works and what they should be looking out for and red flags and so forth. But what is a typical charge? I mean, I know everyone charges at a different, you know, bandwidth, but like, how does it work hiring an private investigator?
So typically private investigators will charge by the hour. They'll do an hourly rate, or they'll have a fixed cost. So it depends on what the case is. And then depending on the task, some tasks are more specialized than others. So some are going to cost more than others, like digital forensics, for example, is highly, highly specialized. The software that they use costs thousands upon thousands of dollars each year to have. So that is going to be worth more per hour than, say, surveillance.
Interesting.
So it depends on the client's situation. I typically charge retainers. So just like when you go to a lawyer, they'll charge a retainer. I do the same thing. And that is more along the lines to protect myself, to make sure I do get paid for the work that I do.
Right.
And what I typically do, I'll talk with the client, assess their situation, and then figure out the strategy and how many hours it would take me. And I estimate how many hours, this is how much it's going to cost. And you know, if the client is unable to pay the full amounts, we can talk about payment plans. I'm very flexible in terms of payment. But the important thing is that it's an amount that is good for me and good for the client.
Right. Exactly. And that time that you put in is covered.
Yeah.
Is there a ballpark figure that they charge an hour, just so we understand? Because we've never hired a private investigator, or I don't know how, you know, we know what lawyers, there's a scale from $250 to like $1,000, literally depending on who you are. And I imagine also state to state is going to have different costs, but what is that? Just so people understand going in, if someone says, oh, that's going to be $1,000 an hour, is that like...
Yeah, so you're right. It does depend on, you know, what state you live in, what city. Obviously, cities are going to charge more than rural areas. I would say it's anywhere between $60 is the lowest I've seen to $350, which would be the highest.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Even for, because I know a lot of forensic accountants, and they charge more than $350. Partly I'm in Southern California, but it's forensic accountants. I mean, it's very specialized work, to your point. Like when you look at what those people are data mining and going through, I would imagine some of those cyber people could really charge.
Yeah, I mean, they may charge more. I'm not really sure. I'm not in that line of work. I don't specialize in digital forensics, but
yeah,
I imagine there would be, I would say $350 or higher.
Yeah. I think the digital part is really a premium service for sure.
Yeah. It's highly specialized.
And do you have colleagues who do that? Would you outsource that for?
Yeah. So the thing about private investigators is that, you know, and with any profession, you can't be the expert in everything. If you're a doctor, you can't be, you're a neurologist or a dermatologist or a surgeon. You're not going to be an expert in all the fields, just like a private investigator. So I'm I believe that you are as good as your network. So it's important to network with other PIs, get to know them, get to know people that you trust in other specialties. So that way, when something comes along and a person needs digital forensics work and I don't do that, I will say, okay, well, I know a good colleague of mine that lives in San Antonio. I trust him. He's done, he specializes in this. He's very good at what he does. I would recommend you to him.
Yeah.
And outsource it.
Great.
Do you provide references? Like, would it be reasonable if I was coming in and being like, can I talk to some of your other clients, or is that not an option?
Oh, some of my other clients.
Like if I'm coming in to hire you.
Yeah. So I want to protect my clients' confidentiality. I don't think that you would probably be able to talk to the clients, but you could talk to, say, the law firms I work with. So, and that wouldn't give away any of the cases that I'm working on, but because I work with several cases, with a law firm. So the law firm could give references.
Great.
Yeah.
And also other PIs that I do a lot of social media exploitation for other PIs. So I end up working with other PIs because I've sort of made that my niche field. And a lot of PIs that I work with, they'll subcontract that work out to me, and like they would be a source of references as well.
Okay, define social media exploitation.
Yes.
Okay.
Same thing. Wow.
So that,
You do this for kids too. Wait a minute. There's a whole nother
I
level.
have teenagers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are a ton of different types of social media platforms, right? And technology is changing all the time so rapidly. I keep up with the change in technology. I keep up with the platforms that are out there. And I do link analysis and find associations between people. I find certain information, like, for example, I had a case before where there was a suspicious death, and we wanted to find out what was the person doing before and after the person's death. And this person was a very prolific social media person. Everything posted about everything on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. So it's a matter of knowing how to get that information on the platforms and then taking pieces of information from here and there and putting them together and making sense of the big picture, and making that into an assessment for the lawyer, because the lawyer is not an investigator. That's not his job, his or her job, right? It's the PI that's going to do that type of work.
Right. That is.
That's fascinating.
So it's really, breaking down the person's character via how we're an open book these days, all of us. Even if we visit once a month of Facebook, you're still in the Facebook.
Still a fingerprint there.
Yeah, the meta universe. Go on.
Oh, I was just going to mention that there's also metadata that people look at, metadata attached to photos. There's obviously you can't geolocate someone's cell phone, that's illegal, but you can figure out where someone has been through, say, the Snapchat location feature, or maybe their location on their Facebook is turned on, or they're posting about they're at this bar at this date. So there's ways to get around that and ways to figure out where people are, what they're doing and who they're talking to, and sort of their behavior and activities.
Right. And you create you write an analysis around this too, right?
Correct,
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, it's fascinating work, thank goodness you're the one who's doing it and not the person who's going through it, because it's really hard. So what's the best way to someone to find you? Should they, need your expertise in it and help? So
I would say visit my website. It's premierpathfinders.com. And my email is samantha@premierpathfinders.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all that in the show notes as well. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Honestly, it's fascinating to us, this world. Yeah, it really is. It's great that our community has you as a resource should they need it. And that you've got that empathetic ear and you can decipher, and understand what that need is from that person. So really important. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to help out as much as I can. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and hoping to help out as much as I can.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. And thank you guys for participating. Do you guys have any questions? I know we have a few in the participants. Any questions?
Don't see anything in Q&A right now.
Okay. Well, on that note then, thank you, Samantha, for joining us, and for our participants and anybody who's listening. We have such a great resource library on our platform on splitfyi.com. We'd love you to visit it, check it out. We've got loads of video library, plethora of videos of professionals that can help you through it. We've got toolkits that can help you through also wherever stage you're at in divorce, and visit us there. And we hope to see you or on social at Split FYI. All right. Thank you.